Hey, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Leadership Toolkit. I'm Mike Phillips, and I look forward to having a really great conversation with you today, having a great collaborative conversation with an amazing guest. As you know, on this show, I bring people on from all different verticals of business to be able to discuss their leadership journey, maybe their management style. We have some organic and good conversations that sometimes about successes, sometimes about failures, but every time about something that will give you an opportunity to learn and grow yourself and to grow the people around you. So thank you for taking the time to join me today. I have an absolutely phenomenal guest on. I was doing most of the talking beforehand. A good friend of mine, Kerri Wise, who is with AutoFi. Hi, Kerri. How are you today?
Hi, Mike. I'm really happy to be on the show.
Thank you so much for making the time to come on the show. So you are the Chief Marketing Officer with AutoFi, and you are also, is it president,
President and
chairman,
co-founder.
president and co-founder of the Women of Color Automotive Network, WOCAN. So I am so excited to have a conversation on your leadership journey, on some of your insights that you have into leadership and management today. So thank you.
Yes, no, this is a really important topic. Obviously, I'm very passionate about leadership.
Absolutely. So if you would do me a favor for some of the people that may be watching the show, if they're watching live, if they're watching later, or certainly if they're tuning into the audio podcast, if you would take a minute and just give a little bit of your background. Where did you get started? Where are you at right now? What awesome things are you doing?
Yeah, well, it's been since 98. I started my career, graduating from college in 98. So I guess that's around 20, 24 years, 20, almost 25 years
Crazy.
in my automotive career, which has been pretty amazing. I started at JD Power and Associates, graduated on a Friday and started at JD Power that Monday.
Wow.
And started working with automotive clients in marketing research and spent 12 years there. And I would say, from a leadership standpoint, my first kind of quote leadership gig was probably a few years in, just managing interns, right? So I was pretty junior myself, but I started managing people only a couple years into my career. And
Okay.
and then I spent 12 years at JD Power in all kinds of roles, from research to sales to analytics to consulting. Moved on to Edmunds.com, my very first role in tech, and as a director. So now I'm kind of mid-career. Spent 4 years helping them develop their dealer business in training and in marketing. Moved to TrueCar as my first vice president role. So now I'm kind of moving up into more upper management, and
That's
spent,
where I think you and I met.
yeah, I think that's where we met. Absolutely. Because I was at every single event. I was not only in charge of their marketing, but also dealer relations at the time. So my face was everywhere trying to kind of change the industry's perception of TrueCar at the time. I was there for 5 years, and then eventually moved on to AutoFi, where I got my first C-suite role as a chief marketing officer. So leadership has looked a lot different over those years, from kind of my more junior years at JD Power, mid-level career, and then now in upper management.
Sure. So, and I do think you and I met at the time during TrueCar, and in between TrueCar and where you're at now with AutoFi,
Yeah.
that is when you and some other ladies launched the WOCAN Women of Color Automotive Network, which we're
Yes.
connected on also, and that certainly you're taking on a leadership role in that.
Well, absolutely. I think with the leadership, and with the power of leadership, there is a responsibility to give back. And for me, I never felt comfortable in the automotive industry necessarily like waving the flag that tied to my identity, right? It was easier just to kind of be an automotive executive and not necessarily bring things that I face as a woman or even as a black person like into the conversation. But I feel
Sure.
like in 2020, the intersection of those, it became harder for me not to give back in that way. And the reality is, I realized when I became a vice president, when I became very visible, I
Hmm.
would have employees that looked like me, whether they be women or minorities, and they would come in my office and they would whisper. They would whisper, right? And they would
That's
say,
crazy.
I took this job because I saw you in a video, right? I took this job because I thought if they put a Black woman on a video for the company, this must be a culture in which I'm going to be accepted. And in that moment, I realized that symbolism matters, and that while I tend to be a very humble person that just goes about my career, a lot of people are looking up to me. A lot of people are looking at my journey and saying, if she can do it, then I can do it too. And that is really where Women of Color Automotive Network came about, is that I wish that I had me 25 years ago
Sure.
to look up to in the automotive industry. And we have to be much more deliberate in having those kind of conversations and realizing that while the industry has evolved so much, while the country has evolved so much, there's still a need for mentorship and being very deliberate about putting examples out there, and also giving back and showing them the roadmap on what it takes to get here. A lot of people don't know that, or they don't grow up in environments in which that's given to
Sure.
them.
No, absolutely. And I think there's a couple things you're pointing out that are attractive as leaders. When you and I first met, I want to say it's probably 2017, 2018. You were,
Yeah,
I
that's
think, in
about
that
right.
VP role. And I remember where you're saying, hey, be deliberate and like right now, and be approachable. I remember coming up to you at a conference, and in my mind, I was intimidated because you were the VP of operations, right? Like you were like there's a certain level when you get that the title carries weight, right?
True.
And I remember approaching you, and you and I sat down and probably talked for an hour.
Yes.
And what's crazy is I remember how humble you were, what a good listener, and still are, what a good listener, and just the fact that you are so approachable. And those things are all very attractive qualities as a leader. So I think that's, I'm sure, served you well, and I think it's awesome that you're taking that approach for up and coming leaders too. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's very it's so, thank you for that, by the way. That's a
Yes,
compliment. And it is
absolutely.
something that I pride myself on, is being like authentic. I always
Hmm.
want to be somebody that if you meet me, you're so much more impressed with me in person than you are based on my social media account, right? And to
Hmm.
me, we live in a world where it's the opposite, right? How many people have you met that you're like disappointed in because the way they present themselves online
Right.
is not like who they really are?
There's an incongruence
Yes.
completely where you go, oh man, that person looks odd. They share awesome stuff and they're
Yes.
motivational and they're this, and then you meet them in person and they're like, they're I won't diss anyone, but like they're flat, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes. And it's disappointing. It goes back to that saying, like, never meet your heroes, right? And
oh,
and because you're going to be disappointed. And I think for me, I think that WOCAN, developing WOCAN was so important because I never took myself that seriously. Even the titles for me, it was like, I still have so much to learn, even when you get to these levels. And but like I said, with WOCAN and this experience, I realized in meeting these women that when you are in this leadership position, when you break through and get those titles and you're in those boardrooms, you have a responsibility to share that with the next generation or the women that are trying to do that, because there is this playbook that you don't realize that you navigated,
mhm.
maybe accidentally, maybe because someone gave you an opportunity, maybe because you were lucky. But either way, you navigated it, and that playbook is not obvious to everybody.
True. Absolutely true. Well, let me ask you, when you're saying, hey, you navigated it,
Yeah.
I, I have so many questions that could stem from this, but I'm going to start here. Who are some people that in your career you were able to look at and say, hey, I want to get there? Who are some people maybe that were mentors or good examples for you?
Yes.
Are you,
Oh, there's
yeah.
so many. I can't even. Well, let me just start by giving a shout out to my parents. You got to start
Okay.
there. And God for making me too. But I think, my parents definitely instilled hard work. And if you look at me and my siblings, like, we are definitely hard workers. We put in the work well before the shine and the sizzle and
Sure.
all the attention that you get from that. But in my career, I could think of several people. They all happen to be men, right? Because I work in automotive, and most of my bosses were men. But I think of one guy his name is Chris Denovi. And when I think about him, for a while, he wasn't even my boss. He was just somebody that I worked for, and I didn't directly report to. But what
Sure.
I remember in him is that I remember that he had some of the same skill sets that I had. And
Okay.
so I was attracted to him as a leader because I saw myself, or I saw my own potential. And what I mean by that is, for me, we all bring something different to the table. And I'm kind of that left brain, right brain. Like I have that creative side of me, but I equally like looking into data and telling stories with data. And it's a
Sure.
weird combination. I'm a weird marketer for that matter. And so I think with Chris, one, I saw those skills that he had that matched my skills and said, okay, if I want to be that, like he was a symbol of what I wanted to be. And I think he spent a lot of time with me, even though he was several levels above me. He spent a lot of time with me, either bouncing things off of me in some cases, even though I was below him, or pulling me into conversations that were strategic. And so he involved me a lot. He
Hmm.
also encouraged me to argue with him or fight him. And to me, some of my best leaders, the ones that I have appreciated the most, have allowed me to debate, to give my input. And maybe they haven't always listened to it, but they've allowed me to be me and to share and to give input, even though I was several levels below them. And so
Well,
that was really important.
no, and so here's a couple things I'm hearing you say, and I always try and recap on the show because one, like I love how passionate people get when they're sharing about their experiences. And then one of the things I like to bring it back to narrow it down. So if people are taking notes and such too, one of the things that I'm hearing you saying is like you do need to look for those attractive qualities that you can that somebody else has already developed,
Yeah.
because we've all heard it said. I remember Tony Robbins saying success leaves clues, right?
Mhm.
So if you go, that person's successful and I can model that, that's where I want to get to. So I think that's really valuable. That's something I'm hearing you saying. On the flip side, one of the things for the higher level, quote unquote, higher
Mhm.
level leaders, people that may be further along the path, or somebody in management, if you're listening to this show, something that's really important, and one of the things I'm taking away from you, Kerri, is the fact that as a leader, as somebody, he may not have been you weren't his direct report,
Yeah.
but he was still viewed as a leader because of the way he carried himself and he invested time.
Mhm.
And I think that that's something that's so valuable for people in leadership roles. There is nothing more valuable that you can invest with people than time. There, and certainly there's lots of other qualities and stuff that we can dive into, but the fact that someone said, and that in something else I love when
Mhm.
you're saying, hey, he had arguments with you. I shared this on another show and I don't remember which one. It might have been with my buddy Sean. We were talking about, one of my favorite quotes is Colin Powell, and he
Mhm.
says, listen, debate sharpens me, but
Mhm.
once we've made a decision, I expect you to embrace it as if it was your own and we're all going to move forward.
Yes.
And so I hear that when you're saying, hey, we had these arguments, that
Debate. Healthy
the
debates.
debates, but part of that is because if he's seeing something in you, he's able to have a genuine and deep conversation on a subject with you, that he obviously he respected your opinion enough to say, well, there might be something else here. But once that decision was made, you guys were off and running.
Then we move forward. Exactly. And I think part of it is that when you're early in your career, you have some insecurities. Like you're faking it to make it to some extent.
Sure.
And so when someone asks your opinion or they bring you in that conversation, it's an endorsement, right? That you have some value, that somebody who you respect, somebody who's at a high level values you enough to invite you into that conversation, and values you enough to ask for your opinion or to entrust you with a portion of the project that might be powerful. If I think about my favorite leaders, all of them have not only acknowledged my voice, they've made room for it. They've made a way for me to be able to share my insights, and they've entrusted me with things that were very important no matter what level I'm at. And that gives you confidence when you move on to your next project or role.
Absolutely. Hey, so I don't forget, because I always forget this stuff at the beginning, but as you guys are watching or listening to the show, you can make sure and connect with Kerri, because I know she's going to drop a ton more knowledge bombs, but connect with Kerri on LinkedIn. She's over on LinkedIn /Kerri, Kerri Wise, Wise. So yeah, I spelled that right.
Yes.
I had to think. But you can make
No
sure and
problem.
connect with Kerri over there. And also, if you're gaining something out of the program, please make sure you like the show and share it. Share it with somebody that they could have an opportunity to listen in or watch and gain some extra knowledge. So, Kerri, let me ask you, as we're talking about, a lot about character qualities and traits of leaders, what are some specifically, maybe not the individuals, but what are some specific traits, like maybe 3 to 5 traits that you would pick out that say, hey, that is a great leadership quality, not just for someone to have, but something that someone may have that you would follow as well?
For me, one of the most important ones is leading by example. I know we have all heard that since we were little kids, but it
Sure.
absolutely holds true in leadership. And it's funny because I took a personality test. I can't remember which one it was as a leader. And at the time, I'm sure it's changed, but it had me as a pace setter.
Okay.
I think it was a pace setter. And so
I
I
could
ran
see
one
that.
marathon one time in my life, believe it or not, 26 miles. And I remember I ran it on my own, but I remember when others were running in these groups, they were following
Mhm.
like somebody who had a sign that said 10 miles, 10-mile run. So if you follow that guy that's running the pace at that pace, you would finish the race in that pace, right? And so
Right.
that's what I think about as a pace setter. It's like it's the person that's running ahead and everybody's just following him, right? And if I do
Hmm.
what he's doing, I'm going to get some of the same outcomes. And so I think of myself certainly as a pace setter, setting the example. I'm not going to ask you to do anything I'm not willing to do. I'm not going to ask you to do more than I would do. And at the end of the day, if you need me to show you the way at some point, I will. If I have to
Sure.
jump in and get my hands dirty, I will. And that's probably where I'm most comfortable with. There's some flaws in that too at times in
Sure.
terms
I
of being
agree.
too involved. Being too involved. I'm working on
Sure.
that, but I think ultimately I'm a pace setter, and I think we have to set the example. So to answer your question, that's number one. Number two, I would say, is authenticity and the ability to build relationships. I consider myself someone, as you mentioned, that's very approachable, and I want my team to feel the same way. It's something that I had to come to grips with as I was moving up the ladder in my career because I majored in business. I saw the shows where leaders like they were like the boss, and in
Right.
my mind, a leader is someone who has like this authority, and they just when you're around them, you're like, that's a leader. Look at them.
They've got background
Yeah,
music. Dun, dun, dun.
stoic
Right.
and
Right.
like in command. It's like the
Sure.
headshot. Their headshot should look like this with their hands folded, like in a serious. And when I joined the real business world, I realized like that's everything that's opposite of me. I'm always smiling, always using my hands. I'm animated. But at the end of the day, I can execute. I can be a business person, and it's okay to be approachable. It's okay to build relationships with people because that's another thing that if you look in leadership, programs for 20 something years ago, 30 years ago, there was almost this like divide between if you're a good leader, you can't be too emotionally invested in your
Hmm.
people
No,
because that makes it
yeah.
hard to fire them and to give them feedback. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. I actually think that by being a relationship oriented person, by being authentic, while you have to have some guardrails on that and you have to have some boundaries, it allows your people to be more comfortable in one being themselves, bringing their best person to the table and coming to you when they need you, right?
Sure.
And being stoic and disconnected to me is not to me the current best practice for
Sure.
being a great leader.
Okay, so I've got leading by example, be the pace
Yes.
setter. I've got authenticity, be
I've got,
relational, and I 100% like you and I are very similar in
yeah.
those senses. So
Yeah.
what would a third
Oh,
one
I got
be?
a
Because we're
third.
wrapping. Yeah, you got to give a
Yes.
third one.
So I think I'm going to use the word flexibility as a
Okay.
leader. There's not a one size fits all approach to everybody on your team, for example. And it's something that I really had to learn. And there's two things that where that really applies. If I was to give you some examples on being
Sure.
flexible and kind of customizing your leadership style and approach dependent on the person. It goes back to once again those personality tests. And when I think about like how disc, I think I'm a D and an I. I'm a dominant and I have the influential person. I'm
Uh-huh.
half and half. And oftentimes, if you're not understanding what your people are, one, you can make judgments about them and their intentions that are off because
Sure.
you're looking out at the lens of the way that you think, the way that you do things, and your people are going to come from different backgrounds or have different personality types.
Hmm.
And so I think for me, that was a lesson that I learned, kind of mid-career is that I actually have to understand where my people are coming from, what motivates them, what their behaviors look like so that I can customize my approach. And so I might be a little more heavy-handed with somebody who kind of needs that push, and then
Sure.
I might be more hands-off with another person that needs complete independence. It just depends on the person. I got to customize my approach and get to know the individual and how can I manage them so that I can get the best out of them. The other thing that where that applies, another example of that is in the interview process. Let me
Yes.
take my personality. Once again, super extrovert. I'm an extrovert. I love people. I love talking. I love being out there. What I found is that I had to check that when I was interviewing people, though, because
Really.
I would oftentimes connect more with people who were like me, extroverts. They like to
Hmm.
talk. You build a connection. You're like, yes, I really like that person. That's not the best person for the job, though. And the
True.
reality is, introverts in many cases have been some of my best employees. And I'm not making a blanket statement out there. There's good extroverts too, but like the reality is, if you're using your own profile to kind of, hire people, connect with your employees, you might be hiring the wrong person. So we have to have flexibility in meeting
Sure.
people where they are, so we can get the best out of them.
No, I think that's fantastic. So you got lead by example, you got authenticity in relationship, you got flexibility. And I've
Yeah,
heard it said, and I'm going to add this statement because I
yeah,
really, really like what you're saying about flexibility,
yeah.
is you got to be rigid in principle, but flexible in approach. So
Oh,
the
I like
key
that.
is like, here's the result we're going for. This is our set of values. This is our principle. So this is where we're headed. And just as you're using the example of interviewing, like what's the outcome you're looking for? What is the skill set that employee needs to have? I think that's really valuable that you're sharing that. And then yeah, you have to be flexible. I thought I shared this on another program one time, and it's like the 1960s, I don't remember the specific year, but the 60s, Green Bay Packers, and everybody's familiar with Vince
Yeah,
Lombardi, right?
yeah.
And he took over a losing team, or we could use it to right now today, fast forward, okay? Coach Prime, right? Deion Sanders
Mhm.
just took over CU,
Yeah.
and like it's a losing program, but the principles and the values are, what do we want to do? We want to win. What
And
does it take to win? Well, we've got to do these things. And the reality is, coaches like that, people like you,
mhm.
coaches in professional sports, are able to connect at least somewhat on a personal level to have, hey, here's the business result and the business values we're going for. But I can connect with you enough to know that what your values are and what is the lens that you're seeing the world through, so that I can put myself there for
Absolutely.
at least a minute. Doesn't mean you have to live there. You just have to be able to see it from another perspective a little bit. So I
100%.
think that is absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to flip the script on you here for just a second, because we talk about, and I mentioned to you last week, I had a really great guest that she brought up, uh, people that are followers, people that are falling in line and following leaders. And you're talking about, like, right now, for example, what's the best person for the job? What's the best interviewee? So if you are somebody that is in a leadership role and you are interviewing people to either come on board for your business or for your task, or uh, for the thing that you're doing right now, if you're in that leadership role and you're interviewing people, what are a couple or three qualities that you look for in somebody that are non-negotiables? Not job specific,
Yeah.
but that are non-negotiable qualities that you're looking for in a potential employee or follower, let's say.
There is one that is standing out. There's multiple, but this is the one that I've been emphasizing, particularly in this last 5 years. I have a word for it, which is
Okay.
curiosity. And I
Love
have
it.
used that so much, even over this last year, of just, are you curious? And by curiosity, I mean, are you willing to teach yourself, to seek out knowledge? The reality is that I don't want to hire someone who only looks to me to train them and to guide them. I want people that are going to go and search for that information themselves. And we are in a time and place where information is readily available. You can become an expert on almost anything by watching YouTube videos. Access to experts is unprecedented relative to even when I started my career. And publications, there's a wealth of information out there. And the reality is that not everyone has that same level of curiosity to go out and get that knowledge. I think about my career in several roles that I took in which I had no background in. The very first time that I was a director of training, I had no background and I took a director role. Guess what I did? I went on and looked at videos and read books and did as much as I could so that I was prepared and had a foundation to do the role. And so the first thing I look for is just curiosity. Are you going to do whatever it takes to prepare yourself, to gain the knowledge, and you're not dependent on somebody else just serving that to you on a platter?
That is a really good one. I love it. So curiosity. So that's one non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable.
What else do you look for people that you're bringing on board, or and let's even say in peers? You know what I mean? That are on that same level. What are you? What's
Yeah, I think
another trait?
collaboration is another big one. How do you collaborate with other people? And one of the things that I think is really important is this isn't about just collaborating with your team. Okay, there's a baseline there. You have to be able to collaborate with your boss, the people that work underneath you. What's more important is how you collaborate cross functionally. And I think that's
Sure.
oftentimes kind of a missed trait that people tend to be, or some people can be very transactional. Like, I want to
Hmm.
collaborate with you if you can do something for me, if you can give me a promotion, or if you'll like me as your boss. But the real work happens when you can collaborate with other people in other departments, for example. A
Hmm.
lot of my career has been about collaborating with industry executives, influencers, other vendors, other dealers, right? And
Sure.
so to me, I want somebody that has that mindset about collaboration. And not only how can you help me, but how am I going to bring value to you so that we all benefit and we win together? And so
That's
collaboration is a huge one.
absolutely. And what would a third one be? So I love it so far. We got curiosity, collaboration for people you're bringing on board. Do you have another C one, or do you have something else?
Oh
What
gosh,
would a
I
third
wish
one?
I did. See, this is where my creativity was limited. I should say creative, but I won't go there.
Okay.
I think I want someone who is going to think of themselves as a leader no matter what level they're at. So leadership is way more than managing people. It is
Hmm.
you taking charge of the area in which you control. It's you bringing ideas to the table. Like, we all have a responsibility to be a leader, and so I want somebody who is going to see themselves not just as a future leader, but a leader now, even as an individual contributor. And I often say, like, I don't know everything. So I need my people to manage up. I need them to guide me a lot of times.
That's a good
I
statement.
got
You need people to manage up.
100,000 things going on and I will miss something for sure. I'm not always as organized as I should be. So if you're an operational, if I hire someone who's operational, who is more in the weeds and the details, like I need you to pull me back sometimes. I've hired you for a reason. I've hired you in many cases for a skill set that I may not have or a function that we're lacking in. And so whether you manage people or not, I need you to come to the table as a leader and bring your thoughts, your insights, your expertise to the table and guide me, manage up.
That is like the coolest statement that I'm gonna have all kinds of little quotes and stuff to be able to attribute to you, because that's so valuable. The fact that you do have to view yourself as a leader, you got to manage up. Like, I haven't heard it phrased that way before, and it's really, really powerful. I've heard, similarly, like John Maxwell has the 360-degree leader. He's saying, look, you can manage from anywhere in an organization. We're all a manager of something. Like, you need to manage yourself. I had Derek Koenig on several weeks ago, and she was talking about, hey, we're all managers of something. We manage ourselves, we manage our families, we manage our lives, right? We all have to lead those, or she was saying lead, not manage. Just so I'm not putting the wrong word out there. This is all about leadership.
Yes.
But we're all leading ourselves in that sense. And so I think that's just a really cool and valid statement.
Some of my favorite employees, they balance following me, but also getting ahead of me. And it's a fine line, right? Because you definitely don't necessarily want an employee that's just like jumping ahead, doing these things, and it's like not in line with your strategy or your goals. But they'll jump ahead of me, meaning that I ask them for something. They take the spirit of what I've asked for. They put their lens, their expertise on it, and come back to me with some additional ideas in which I did not ask for. And I love awesome. That kind of employee, because to me, it's like, once again, sometimes I'm so busy and I'm asking for something, but I am not necessarily thinking it through completely. And so I need that person to take charge in some ways and say, thank you for what you asked for. And how about this as well?
What about this?
How about this?
That's really good. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because it's easy for me, and especially you and I have a lot of similarities when it comes to the way we present, right? Like I always want to look at the positive side. What's the upside? What's the motivational side? And what's we can keep that jazz and that fire and that excitement. I do want to ask, like, what are some things that you've learned from? And you've had a really strong leadership career, like you said, for 25 years, which I would not have guessed. It couldn't be over 10 years that you've been involved in this.
I did start when I was 5 years old. I forgot to mention.
Okay, that's fair. So for the amount of time, the amount of experience, and the amount of expertise that you've developed over this, like, yes, there's a lot of good things, but you don't get to the good automatically without stumbling along the way. So what are some stumbling blocks? What are maybe just one or two points that you can pinpoint in your career that you say, man, I hit a wall, this sucked. Here's where I hate saying it like this, but I will. Here's where I failed, but here's what I learned from it and how I came out on the other side.
I think of this as a continuous journey. And let me just rephrase that. I think of leadership as a continuous journey. And
absolutely.
So when you were asking this question, the answers that I'm going to give you, I'm still working on. I've learned the lessons, and I've progressed, and I've moved ahead and forward. But I feel like sometimes they always rear their ugly head sometimes, in terms of like the challenges you have as a leader. And a lot of that's tied to your own personality, your upbringing, right? Like it is hard to change at times. So for me, I would say there's two areas in which, there's struggles, and I have to continuously be aware of and work on them. And one of them is holding people accountable and really being more rigid and drawing those lines and being very clear on the expectations and also the consequences when those expectations weren't met. And I feel like, to me, being a people person, in many ways being a people pleaser, if I was to be honest, it conflicts sometimes
Mhm.
with having to be harder and come down on somebody who's maybe not performing as well. I remember the very first person I ever fired in my career. I mean, that was a process for me, right? Like,
Oh
the
yeah.
night before, I was like preparing and like trying to figure out, like, how am I going to separate the emotion of
Mhm.
firing this person? How am I not going to think about their family and what they're going to do when they don't have a job, like, and separate those two. And so I
Sure.
think, to me, I am much better at it. I have since fired a lot more people than that person, but
Take note,
um,
folks. Take note.
I will fire you. But no, I'm joking. But it's not a natural thing for me. And I think for
Sure.
other people, they can be a lot more black and white on, here's what I expect. This is a line. And if you don't meet that line, you're out, or I'm gonna write you up. And I think for me, I've had to learn that, um that and kind of separate the emotional side of my teams or my employees with the expectation and the goal that we set that we have to meet. And the reality
Sure.
is that if we have somebody on the team that's not doing their job, it's not only hurting me as their boss or them as an individual, it's hurting the entire team. And so for
Right.
me, it makes it that bar. I've learned that, like, we have to set that bar, because otherwise the entire team fails. I fail as a leader. So that would be
No,
my first one.
so holding people accountable, and I
Kind
agree with you, it's
yeah.
hard. But one of the things that I'm hearing you say, and here's where I picked the stuff out of it. Something I'm hearing you say that is really valuable for anyone. What I'm learning from it as you're speaking is you have to manage by expectation.
Yes.
Right? That's one of the ways that creates accountability is if, like, here's the line, here's the vision, here's where we're headed. Do you agree with, or manage by agreement too, right? Do
Yeah.
you agree with that? Here's my expectation. Do you agree with it? Yes. If they're in agreement, like, then they know what's coming, and we communicate that with them. And I agree with you. Like, firing or reprimanding,
Mhm.
that is not the fun part of leadership or management. It's just not. But I will tell you, in my career, there are times, because I'm going on, my goodness, almost 30 years of coaching and leadership myself. And there's times that, like, that has to be the outcome. If you
Yeah.
made an agreement, the person's not producing what needs to be produced, that has to be the outcome. They know that has to be the outcome. And then I've had some of those conversations, and you've probably experienced this too. And anybody who's been in leadership any length of time, that you have to let somebody go for their production, their results, whatever the case may be. And they'll thank you because they say, okay, I get
A
it.
relief.
Thank you. Can you offer a recommendation? Because they're still going to be able to produce and be good at something. There's still value for
Yeah.
them. It's just they may not fit in that particular role or that piece. And sometimes people need that help from leadership to
Yeah.
accept that release, and they go, okay, thanks. And it's almost a relief for them too, because they know, most of the
They were
time people
struggling.
know when they're not doing a great job in those situations.
I think the harder part for me too is when things evolve within a business. So the
Mhm.
people that got you there may not be the people that are going to get you to the next place.
Oh
And
yeah.
for me, that's hard because you may have hired that person. There's some ego involved, right? And that you
Sure.
selected that person, that you made
Right.
the decision on that person, and then all of a sudden the business has changed, our goals
Hmm.
have changed, our direction has changed, and maybe this person isn't a match anymore. And that becomes very difficult, right? Like, moving past your ego. And so for me, I think I'm working on not holding on for so long. There's been many
Sure.
times where I knew what the right decision was, but I work so hard, or maybe if I train, or maybe if I spend some more time with them and coach them, like, I'll get them there. And the reality
Right.
is, I should have done it a while back.
Well, and when it comes to accountability, one of the things to realize is oftentimes that, I think you make a good point here too, is sometimes the business has outgrown that individual.
Yes.
But on the flip side, and fairly so, sometimes that individual's outgrown the business.
True.
And so that that it has to be a constant growing and grooming of both of those pieces so that it can continue to be a fit, so that people, because everybody wants to feel successful, so when they're not, I think that's really valuable what you're saying about accountability. So what else is something
Oh,
that
there's a
you've led?
second
What else
one.
has been a struggle? There's a second one.
The
This is
negatives.
the
Okay.
hey, this is the good parts. This
This
is
is
what
where
people
you learn the
because
most. I
that is hard.
completely
Nobody wants
agree.
to talk about that. No one wants to
Yes,
say, "Oh, well, I got to fire people and accountability and so forth." And yeah, we have a little levity when we're talking about it, but that stuff's hard. If you're a human and you have a heart, it's hard,
yes. It
right?
is hard. Leadership is hard work. I think my second one, going back to kind of being the pace setter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. Like I had to do
Nice.
all the sports. I was good at most things I did. And I think,
What three sports?
oh, I played volleyball, basketball, and softball. But I
Nice.
played basketball in college. So I went on to move
Okay.
to play basketball in college.
Okay.
So,
Not
but
to get
I
all
was the
sidetracked.
one that was like, I was pretty good at most things, right? Like I was good at a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things. And I think as a leader, especially if you're very competent in like from a
Mm-hmm.
skill set standpoint, you could just take on too much, right? And like you have to take yourself out of the situation. It's kind of like the Michael Jordan example where they say like Michael Jordan's a great player, but he might not be a good coach. He probably wouldn't be a good coach because he would
Mm-hmm.
hold these standards or he would get involved. He'd want to jump in the game, sort of like
Mm-hmm.
scoring for his team. I think for me, it goes back to that. Like being a pace setter is great. Like I can show you the way. I can jump in when I need to, but being able to delegate and move out of these situations and put the pressure on your team to do the job for me is a continuous struggle. And in many cases, I have to like find ways to remove myself. For example, in meetings, I'm quick to share my position or my voice in a call, and I
Sure.
realize that when I start talking, at some point, no one else is talking. No one else
Mm-hmm.
is talking because they're waiting on me. And so what I will typically do is I will ask my team a question. A lot of times I know the answer. I feel very strong about the answer, but I will pause. I will mute myself and I will be okay with silence sometimes just to let
Sure.
them take control, take more ownership of the problem and not just wait for me. So I guess to answer your question, just removing yourself out of the situation and empowering your people to do more to me is a continuous struggle. And
Sure.
I've gotten better, but I still have moments where I'm like, here, I'm doing it again.
Well, yeah, and I think that's really easy for people that have some of those natural traits in leadership. It's easy to just go, "Hey, just here, give it to me. I got
Yeah.
this." Right. And that if you do that all the time, one of the things I think we realize as we get older and wiser is when we're doing it all the time, yeah, we already know how to do it, but you're robbing somebody else of the experience of a growth opportunity. You're
Yeah.
robbing somebody else of the opportunity to feel accomplished. Not you specifically, but
Yes.
like I've been there. One reason I can comment on this, like I said, you and I carry a lot of similarities, Kerri, and it's like I've done it, and I've at times one of the hard parts is hearing the feedback on it because I've had mentors in
Yeah.
my life that have come and said, "Hey," and they're less tactful than this, but like, "Hey man, you got to shut up." Right,
Right.
right. You got to stop
Exactly.
talking. And it's like, well, because other people have valid ideas and opinions, and
Yeah.
if you're constantly filling that space, it does rob them the opportunity
It
to grow.
a little bit of it is this like mentality that is a little warped, but of like, let me take my team on my shoulder. Like I got us.
Mhm.
Like I'm such a good leader. I'm gonna hold the team. But what you also prevent people from failing. And so you come in and save the day. They're gonna
Mhm.
fail, and you come in and save the day, which, as you mentioned, you rob them from a learning opportunity because sometimes you have to fail.
Absolutely.
And so it's that balance, which is always a hard one of how do you let your team learn and fail without letting the whole thing fail, which would impact me as a leader. And I feel like that is always, to me, the struggle of like, how much do I jump in? When do I jump in if needed? And how much guidance do I give so that I can balance letting them succeed or fail or and own it, and also think about the entire company and our objectives. And ultimately, I want my whole team to win. And it's
Absolutely.
a struggle.
Well, using the sports analogy, you said, "Hey, you're a 3-sport athlete." All of my kids have been involved in athletics all their lives. I played hockey for 20 years, and one of the things I remember, this statement, I think it was with my oldest son. We were talking, and he was like waiting to hear what the coach had to say, and just inadvertently, I said to him, "Son, the coach isn't in the huddle." And you got to realize at some point, like, the coach isn't in the huddle. If it comes to softball, right? The coach is not out there on the field. You guys are coming together. You're making a game plan. That's the people. You're the ones making the movement. And at that point, the coach may be on the side throwing their clipboard down and cursing at people and so forth. But the bottom line is, they should have already done their coaching. Right. As a leader.
I love what you're saying, because back to sports analogies, I had a coach that yelled at us, cursed at us, probably abused us in this day and age. Probably we wouldn't be SPC now.
We all did. Yeah.
Right? But like in practice, right? He did it in practice. He made us run. It was just really tough to play for him in practice. In the game, didn't do that. Didn't yell. Was pretty calm, and it was his philosophy. Like, by the time we get to the game, you guys are the ones playing. You have to execute on the strategy. So I'm going to be hard on you in practice, but in the game, he was pretty quiet. And so I think you're right. Like, I there's a lot to learn about sports, but to me, it's like a continuous process of being a leadership. It's a little bit like, AA. You know what I mean? You're on this journey. Yep. And I haven't been in AA, but I'm familiar with you're on this journey, and it's an evolving journey, and you're moving forward, but you're never there completely. You always have to kind of be aware of your natural tendencies as a leader, because they will rear their ugly heads, particularly in times of stress, right? Like in times of stress, when things are kind of breaking down, to me, that's where my bad habits kick in.
I think that's where everybody's bad habits kick in. Here's a comment from Ben. He says, "It's the struggle from the day you start leading to the day you're in charge of the whole thing. How to pass on responsibility and authority in ways that both build the people and achieve the mission."
Oh, that was so good, Ben. You articulated that so well. Thank you.
He articulates everything well.
This is like a support group. We all need to be a part of as leaders, right? And
absolutely.
And getting past that.
So I think it's just it's all so valuable. So let me ask you, you've talked a lot about, and even now you're saying, hey, I need to learn to step back and give people the opportunity to speak and so forth. How do you encourage your team as a leader to really, and you touched on, well, sometimes if there's silence, there's just silence.
Yes.
How do you continue to encourage people to bring new ideas to the table?
I think I try to do what was done for me, which is sometimes it's calling on people. And right, because you're in a group meeting, it's really easy to kind of hide in those kind of group meetings if you're an individual. Sure. And so a lot of times it's calling on somebody. It's saying, "Hey, so and so, I want to know what are your thoughts," right? So that, and it's not to put them on the spot or embarrass them, but it's more of just to open the floor up for them. A lot of times, I'm very aware of the quiet person in the room, and I try to be thoughtful of, are they quiet because they're just quiet and they have nothing to say? Or are they quiet because we haven't created an environment that allows them to speak? I remember being that quiet person and not feeling comfortable. So anyways, it's just being, to me, having awareness of that, calling on individuals and asking them questions so that they can contribute. It's also about, and I'm not always consistent with this, but asking them for feedback on me as a leader. We
Oh,
have a
that's good.
review. I give them some feedback, and I think it always should end with, and is there anything I can do better to help you? It goes back to managing up, giving
Mhm.
them kind of like the freedom to say, "Hey, I'm okay with you disagreeing with me. I really am. I'm not one of those leaders that's going to put you in the corner
Well,
on
they
the
have to
right."
trust and feel
Yeah,
safe for you. I mean, if they
it's
don't
safety.
trust you, if they don't feel safe with what you're saying, they're never
Yes.
going to give you real feedback.
I love that word that you just said. You're so good at like kind of like summarizing what I'm saying, but it's creating that safe space. And I remember throughout my career, particularly as I moved up the ladder, disagreeing with a leader and being punished for it,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Being punished for it. Like, never did that leader treat me the same way again. I could tell I ruffled some feathers by disagreeing with them. And so I never want to create an environment like that where someone's
sure.
afraid because I'm going to punish them. And
I
ultimately,
absolutely agree.
my decision stands at some point, right? I'll debate a little bit. We'll go a couple rounds. And then if I still feel very strongly with it, my decision will stand. But I want
Sure.
the input. And I tend to tell my teams that, like, I need your input and
Sure.
guidance.
No, I think that's really valuable too, because that's something I'm much more or I'm much less eloquent sometimes in the moment. Like I'll be asking my team and we'll be talking about stuff. And even when we're talking about growth as an overall group, I've looked at people and asked the question just straight out, okay, what do we do here that's dumb? And it's like, that's not an eloquent way to ask that, right? But if your team is confident that you are genuine in the question and that you're trustworthy, you'll get a real answer. And so I
Yeah.
think that's
I, I
I
I
think that's
just
really
got
valuable.
feedback from one of my employees. I'm going to put her on the spot, but she said to me, "Hey, our meetings need to be more structured. Like there's not a good enough agenda, and we're not focused in the meetings." It's just great, and I brought that up on my last meeting. I said, "Hey, I got some feedback. We need to work. I need to work on that." It's really good
Sure.
feedback. And if she wouldn't have told me that, I think I would have been a little bit oblivious to it. To me,
Sure.
everything seemed to be working fine.
You're like,
So
hey, it's upbeat. We're getting
yeah,
stuff done. And she's
we're
looking
checking
for no,
off.
no, no. I need bullet points, man.
Yes.
Where are we going?
And it's a good point. It's a good point. And so
Sure.
I think we get lots of good ideas from the top, from the bottom, from everywhere. And so I want to create a space. I also have had employees that told me to back off. I got it. I got it. And I
Yep.
love that. I love that. I got this. I don't need you involved in here. I'm going to proactively take this. And so sometimes it is about, I got it. Trust me, I'll get it done.
Well, and I think that's important for employees to feel empowered. You have to trust them. They
Yeah.
have to know that they're listened to, that, okay, hey, if I tell you I've got it, then trust me enough to get it. And either win, lose or draw, right? Win or fail, you got to give them an opportunity. Hey, as we're coming up almost to an hour here, so thank you very much for your time. I'd say again for anybody here on the show, if you're not connected with Kerri, she is absolutely phenomenal. I've got it on the screen. I'll mention it for anybody who may be listening later. It's linkedin.com/, the little n / KerriWise, Kerri Wise. So I would encourage you to connect with her. She's awesome. Kerri, any final thoughts sort of to take us out for today? Anything else you want to bring it all together?
Well, I
Oh,
think there is a responsibility in being a leader. And it's, as we said, it's a continuous process. So if you ever feel intimidated by somebody that you see in a leadership role, just know, like, there's a lot of struggles behind that, and that you can get there with the work. um but it takes a lot of work, but there's also a lot of responsibility and power with that. And to me, giving back is a huge deal. So Mike, thank you for letting me be on this podcast. And this is part of giving back, right?
absolutely. No, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to. I again, you're a phenomenal leader, a phenomenal person, and I knew you would bring the fire with you today to be able to share a lot about your journey and about leadership overall, but really how to impact people and help people grow. So I appreciate you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, everybody. So for those of you that have tuned in live, thank you so much. If you're tuning in later, I appreciate you very much. Make sure you can check out the podcast at theleadershiptoolkit.com. You can always check out past episodes at youtube.theleadershiptoolkit.com. Make sure and like the episode, throw some thumbs up on it, share this episode, because Kerri brought a ton of insightful and powerful information to share with people. And so I hope you've gained a lot out of it. We really value your time. And that's what the goal of this podcast is to help impact you, and grow your people. I appreciate you all very much. Look forward to seeing you back here again next week, same time on Wednesdays, 12:05 Mountain Time in the afternoon. And until then, continue to be great. We'll see you soon, everybody.